Welcome to Pilgrim's Rest channel. Our mission here is dedicated to introducing the historical spiritual literature that has been handed down through the ages. The idea is to offer deep rest and supply for saints on their pilgrimage, leading to renewed strength for the journey ahead.
And today, we're opening a book that really is one of the most, reliable roadmaps for that journey in the modern age, wouldn't you say? We're taking a deep dive into C.S. Lewis's really powerful defense of faith, Mere Christianity.
Right, and we want to frame this for you, the listener, the person who's actively seeking spiritual growth. Maybe you're looking for those foundational supplies for your path. This isn't just dry theory. Lewis offers the necessary building blocks of truth.
He absolutely does. And Lewis himself, Clive Staples Lewis, born 1898, he's kind of the ideal guide, isn't he? We often think great Christian writer, but first he was this intellectual powerhouse, a fellow at Oxford, then Cambridge in English literature, steeped in logic, philosophy.
But what makes him so powerful, I think, is that he didn't just accept faith easily. He famously came to Christ kicking and screaming. He was a committed atheist for years. And that journey, it meant he really understood the skeptic, the doubter. He'd been there.
Exactly. And you can see how that background shapes the whole of Mere Christianity. It didn't even start as a book for, quiet study. It actually began as 3 sets of BBC radio talks, delivered right across Britain during the absolute darkest days of World War II, between 42 and 44.
Just pause and think about that context for a second. Bombs are literally falling, cities are burning, people are facing death and loss every single night. Lewis couldn't afford to be obscure or get bogged down in denominational specifics. He had to deliver clear, logical truth that spoke to everyone.
And that's where his famous term comes from, Mere Christianity. Lewis was trying to lay out the core stuff, the absolute essentials that pretty much all Christians agreed on, Anglicans, Catholics, Methodists, Baptists, whoever. He wasn't trying to settle arguments about, say, infant baptism or how churches should be run. Not the point.
He used that great analogy, the one about the hall and the rooms. It's so helpful if you see yourself as a pilgrim. Christianity, he said, is like a big hall. Now, the hall itself isn't where you live. It's a place to wait, gather your strength, maybe decide which specific room, which denomination or tradition is right for you.
Yeah, and the strategic importance of that is huge. The hall gives you that non-negotiable foundation before you choose a specific path. You can't just camp in the hall forever, Lewis says, but you also can't really get into any room properly without first agreeing on what the whole house is built on. That's the essential supply we need.
Okay, so if that's the foundation, where does Lewis start? Not with the Bible, interestingly, or specific doctrines. He begins with something he saw as totally universal, the law of human nature, or, the moral law.
It's a brilliant opening move, really. He shows this law exists just by looking at how people argue. Think about it. When people quarrel, they don't just, hit each other. They appeal to some standard. Hey, that's my seat. I was here first. Or, come on, you promised.
Right. Arguing only makes sense if there's some shared idea of how people ought to behave. If there weren't a real standard of right and wrong, we wouldn't argue, we'd just fight like animals. Arguing is trying to show the other person is wrong, according to a law we both somehow recognize.
And he just dismantles the common objections. First, he says, look, it's not just social convention, even though, moral rules differ a bit across cultures. He compares it to traffic laws. Some drive on the right, some on the left, fine. But the core idea, don't be selfish and crash into people, that's universal.
And the second point is maybe even deeper. It's not just herd instinct. This is crucial. If you see someone drowning, you might feel 2 instincts pulling you. The herd instinct pushing you to help, and self-preservation yelling, stay safe.
Exactly. And the moral law is the third thing. It's the voice that steps in and tells you which impulse you ought to obey. It judges the instincts. So logically, it can't be just another instinct. It's a real standard outside of our feelings, like math. 2 + 2 = 4, whether you like it or not.
And this is where Lewis lands the first really heavy punch, setting up the need for everything that follows. He lays out 2 facts he says are undeniable. First, we humans are haunted by the idea of this moral law, how we ought to behave. Second, we don't do it. We constantly break the very law we acknowledge.
That gap, that failure, that's the key turning point for the pilgrim. Lewis basically argues that Christianity doesn't make any sense until you face that predicament. He uses that doctor analogy. You'll only listen to the doctor when you admit you're actually sick. If you just think you're a bit under the weather or a fundamentally decent person, the diagnosis feels, irrelevant or even offensive.
Okay, so we accept this universal brokenness, but trying harder obviously hasn't fixed it for humanity or for us individually. What does Lewis see as the core issue?
Well, if the machine itself is broken, just telling the crew to steer better is pointless.
Okay.
You need something more fundamental. And that leads us right into book 2, the heart of it. The claims of Christianity.
Yeah.
Focusing on the one figure who claimed to be the solution, Christ.
Yes. This is where we get perhaps his most famous and often debated argument. The lunatic, liar, or Lord trilemma.
It gets summarized pretty crudely sometimes, but its force is in how it cuts off the easy options. Lewis insists that a man who went around saying the things Jesus said, especially claiming to forgive sins. I mean, think about that. Forgiving sins people committed against others, that's basically claiming the offense was ultimately against him. That's not something a mere good moral teacher does. It's staggering.
So to make claims like that, Lewis argues, he has to be either who he said he was the son of God, or he was a lunatic, totally delusional, like someone thinking they're a poached egg, or the third option, something worse, a deliberate deceiver. He really pushes you out of that comfortable middle ground, the nice teacher idea.
Yeah, and critics might say, oh, it's a false trichotomy. Maybe he was mistaken or just a myth. But Lewis is dealing with the historical claims as reported. If the Gospels give us a generally reliable picture of what Jesus claimed, Lewis says, then those claims demand a radical choice. He forces you to confront the implications of the claims, not just the nice bits of teaching.
So if we accept Lord, what then? What was the actual point of this divine invasion, as Lewis sometimes calls it? It's clearly more than just giving us good advice.
Absolutely. It's the atonement, his death and resurrection. Lewis says this somehow achieved reconciliation, gave us a fresh start. And he's very practical here, which is great supply for the pilgrim. He says, look, Christians might have different theories about how exactly Christ's death put us right with God. Was it a payment, a victory, a substitution? But the core agreement is that it did. It worked.
Like knowing a meal nourishes you without needing to understand the biochemistry of digestion. The key thing is the provision is real. It works. It gives energy for the journey.
Precisely. And this provision leads to the ultimate goal, which he untacks mainly in Book 4, becoming new men, as he puts it. This is where he brings in that crucial distinction between two kinds of life.
Right, bios and zoe. Can you unpack those?
Sure. Bios is the natural biological life. It's temporary. It runs down. It's the life we share with animals and plants. It's made life. Zoe, on the other hand, is the spiritual eternal life. It's God's own kind of life, uncreated, begotten life flowing into us.
So the Christian goal isn't just to sort of polish up our bios, be a bit nicer, try a bit harder. It's a total transformation. It's about receiving Zoe. Lewis actually talks about it like the next stage in evolution, a new kind of human being that's already appeared in Christ. The whole point is to catch this good infection.
That's the phrase. We're meant to become little Christs. And how do we do that? How do we catch this infection, receive Zoe? Lewis describes it as putting on Christ. It's about opening ourselves up completely to the one man in whom this new life was fully present. Fundamentally, it's about surrender, not striving, allowing Christ to work in us, rebuilding the machine from the inside out.
Okay, so if the machine is being rebuilt, that brings us to the really practical supplies Lewis offers in Book 3, the actual nuts and bolts of morality for the pilgrim being transformed. He stresses that morality has 3 parts, and we tend to focus on just one.
Yes, the 3 parts are, 1, how we relate to each other, social morality. 2, getting things right inside ourselves, our inner life character. And 3, our relationship with the power that made us, worship, belief. And we're obsessed with number 1, aren't we? Social harmony.
And Lewis warns that's self-deception if you ignore the others. He uses that brilliant quote, "What is the good of telling the ships how to steer if they're such crazy old tubs that they cannot be steered at all? You have to fix the ship itself, the inner life."
Exactly. And when it comes to fixing the inner life, Lewis points his finger straight at the root of the problem, the great sin, the vice that fuels all the others, pride.
Pride. It sounds simple, but Lewis's description is just devastatingly insightful. He calls it the complete anti-God state of mind.
Because it's essentially competitive. That's the key insight. Pride doesn't just take pleasure in having something. It takes pleasure only in having more of it than the next person. It's all about comparison, rivalry, being better than, which by its very nature puts you in opposition to God, who is infinitely superior, and others whom you're supposed to love.
So for us pilgrims trying to diagnose this in ourselves, what's Lewis's quick test for pride? How do you spot it?
It's simple, really. Notice how much you dislike pride in other people. When someone snubs you or patronizes you or shows off, and you feel that surge of anger or resentment, That, Lewis says, is your own pride being wounded by the competition. Pride hates seeing pride in others.
Wow, that's uncomfortable. And he also turns humility on its head, doesn't he? It's not about putting on a show of being worthless.
Not at all. He says true humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking about yourself less. The truly humble person isn't the smarmy, self-deprecating type. It's the person who has genuinely forgotten about themselves because they're so interested in God or in other people or their work. They're looking outwards, not inwards.
Alongside humility, another vital supply he offers is about love or charity, especially for pilgrims who struggle because their feelings are up and down. He makes that critical point. Christian love, charity, is primarily a state of the will, not just an emotion.
Yes, feelings come and go. You can't just command yourself to feel affection for someone, but you can command your will. Christian love means choosing to act lovingly, choosing to serve and do good to your neighbor, whether you feel warm and fuzzy about them at that moment or not.
That's incredibly practical advice for the daily grind of the pilgrimage. The rule is basically do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor, act as if you did.
Exactly. And the interesting thing Lewis notes is that if you consistently act in loving ways, exercising your will toward kindness, the feelings often follow. You don't act rightly because you feel loving. Eventually, you might start to feel more loving because you've been acting rightly. The action comes first.
Okay, one last big area. For the pilgrim who feels crushed by the standard, this call to perfection, Lewis offers both a challenge and a comfort. The challenge is that Christ won't settle for half measures.
Right. He uses the dentist analogy. You go in wanting one bad tooth fixed, but the dentist looks and says, actually, the whole jaw needs work. Christ won't stop at just making us slightly nicer. He's not aiming for decent little cottages. He's building a palace, Lewis says, fit for himself to live in. He demands perfection.
That sounds impossible. Where's the comfort?
The comfort comes from something Lewis quotes from George MacDonald. God is easy to please, but hard to satisfy. Think about it. God is pleased with our very first stumbling attempts. Like a father delights when his baby takes its first wobbly step, he's genuinely pleased. But he won't be satisfied until we reach the full potential, the perfect manly walk of the mature child. That perfection is the end goal, the full transformation of bios into Zoe. It's a process.
So ultimately, Lewis brings it all back to the final destination, the real aim of the pilgrimage. He emphasizes the virtue of hope. We shouldn't be aiming for just making things a bit better here on Earth.
No, because if you aim only at earthly things, Lewis warns, you'll lose both earth and heaven. But his famous line captures the paradox. Aim at heaven and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you will get neither. Keeping your eyes on the eternal prize changes everything about the journey now.
The whole roadmap, all these supplies, the transformation itself, it seems to hinge on this one core radical demand that Lewis presents over and over as the key. Maybe that's the final provocative thought for every pilgrim listening.
Give up yourself and you will find your real self. Lose your life and you will save it. It's the great paradox at the heart of the faith. Surrender leads to true life.
Thank you for listening to Pilgrim's Rest channel. Hope to see you next time.